Hey, that's pretty good. What'd you wish, Mary?
Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight?
Dance by the light of the moon. What'd you wish when you threw that rock?
Oh, no.
Come on, tell me.
Hello and welcome to a very special preempt of Book versus Movie. We're doing a holiday preempt. We've never done this before. I am Margot P. of the Chingona Homesteader, and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fitchick.
Hi, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. It's this week.
Yes, it is.
And I have hardly done any shopping. I'm super behind. I barely sent. I have a card here for you. I haven't sent it yet.
Yours went in the mail the other day.
Oh, really? I actually got around to making them, so that's cool. But I haven't actually. I'm staring at them, and there's a huge stack on my desk right now. But we were going to be doing The Wizard of Oz today, but we decided to change our minds.
Just like that, Margot, you sent me a note and said, did you know that It's a Wonderful Life is based on a short story? And I was like, no. And then we looked it up and it's on Kindle. It's easy to get. And so we were like, I've seen It's a Wonderful Life like a couple of hundred times. So I thought, yeah, we could talk about that. So that's what we're doing today. It's a Wonderful Life, and it's based on a book called The Greatest Gift.
That's right. I did not know either that it's based on a short story. I found out at work. I work with a lot of libraries as part of my job, and so my Twitter stream is filled with library stuff. And one of the librarians that I follow on Twitter was tweeting about the scene in It's a Wonderful Life where Clarence says she's about to close up the library. And it was this long, it was hilarious. It's a very long, when you have those Twitter conversations that are just so funny and like they go on and on and on. And so it was this long feed of convo, and I'm, laughing and reading it. And somebody says in the middle of this conversation somewhere, somebody says that, oh, in the book, Mary is married and has kids with some other guy. And I was like, what? And how did we not know this?
I guess the story is more about the movie than the source material. It's more about Frank Capra, and it's usually more about Jimmy Stewart. Yeah. I think that's just become the narrative over the years. So we didn't even consider the fact that this came from this kind of a source, a short story, but it did.
So before we get to that, though, in case you're new.
Yeah, exactly. We just jump right in.
We just jump right in because we'd never done a preempt before, so excuse us our eagerness. But this is Book versus Movie. We read books that have been adapted into movies, and then we talk about them. We're not experts, but we're opinionated, I think I could say, for both of us. Mm-hmm. And so we try to figure out which we like better. And we did, every holiday season we try to do holiday movies, and we were kind of done and had to kind of wrap that up. And we were going to do The Wizard of Oz today, but then I read this on Twitter, and now we're going to do It's a Wonderful Life. But if you would like to learn more about this podcast or check out some of our other episodes, make sure that you follow us on Facebook, and there's a couple ways you can do that.
Right. We have a basic Facebook page. Just type in Book versus Movie. We post all the episodes there. Like that page. We also have a Facebook group, and you ask to join the group, and then people are super interactive with one another. It's a really nice place to hang out, especially if you like talking about books and movies, and our fans usually do. So that's a great place to do it. I'd say also you following us on Twitter at Book versus Movie, spell it out. We have an Instagram page now. It's Book versus Movie, you spell it out. We also have email. You can send us a note, comments, suggestions, bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And I also want to say we also have some stickers. If y'all want some Book versus Movie stickers, send us an email, let us know, and I'll put it in the mail for you right away.
Anything else?
Yeah,
we should. So. Or what? Go ahead.
Let's just say we are brought to you by Audible, and for you listeners of Book versus Movie, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. And I just wanted to recommend to you guys, it's the book we're going to be, the short story we're talking about today, The Greatest Gift. It is available on Audible, and it is narrated by none other than Edward Herman. And it's really great. He's one of the greatest narrators, RIP. So in order to try this service out for yourself, just go to audibletrial.com/book versus movie. Again, that's audibletrial.com/book versus movie for your free audiobook.
I thought that the story of this story was so fantastic. It was written by, let's see, what's his name? Philip Van Doren Stern.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, his mother's last name was Van Doren. So he has his mother's maiden name as his middle name, which I thought was kind of interesting. But anyway, he always wanted to be a writer, and he was kind of like writing his whole life, but he wasn't really successful at it. And he got this idea for this story like in a flash, and he could see the entire story from start to finish, and he wrote it, and he said it wasn't very good, and so he kind of put it away for a few years, and then he brought it out again later and reworked it a little bit, and he was like, I think this is a pretty good story, and he sends it all over the place, and he gets no takers, and so but he believes in the story, and so what he does is he prints it up himself, kind of like we were talking about Charles Dickens recently. We were talking about Christmas Carol and how Dickens took on the publishing himself. So he publishes, basically prints it up himself, and he sends it 200 copies as a little pamphlet, 21 pages, because it's a short story, and he sends it as a Christmas card to his friends in 1943.
And it's 200 copies that go out, and people start to hear about this story, and it starts to get passed around to people, and people make copies of it. And eventually it finds a place in Hollywood, and it finds a place with Frank Capra, who just started Liberty Films, and he was looking for a project. And Frank Capra, by the way, is his own backstory. I mean, talking about super interesting people. But what happened was he was directing films in the 30s, and he was getting very popular, and then the war hits. And then he made propaganda films for the U.S. government, and Jimmy Stewart and many actors joined the military and served. And then all these men came home, and men and women came home, and they started making movies again. And it's like, well, the business is different and the world is different, and what are we going to put out there? And Capra struggled because he hadn't had a movie out, I believe, since Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which was in 1939. So he gets this project, and he buys it, and he brings on Jimmy Stewart. And it's incredible. I mean, the very basics. I mean, should we talk about the short story? It's a short story, guys. I could tell you.
It's a very, very short story. Yes, and it's good. I think it's very well written.
I do too. I think you could tell he put a lot of time into it. And it's George Bailey is in this book, but they kind of begin with him in the short story. All it is him at the bridge, and he's contemplating committing suicide. And then a stranger shows up and says, "Hey man, what are you doing?" And his name is not Clarence. We don't get the idea he's an angel. We don't know who or what he is. But they start talking for a few minutes, and then it turns out George, he's married, has kids. He doesn't have a debt. He's more just like, I would say, clinically depressed. He's a very depressed human being. He doesn't know where he fits in the world, and he just feels alone and desperate. And so this person gives him the ability to be as if he had never existed in the first place. And so George goes by the tree where he crashed the car. The car isn't there because he didn't drive the car. And then, and the person gives him a bag of brushes, and people used to clean their furniture with brushes for dust and stuff like that, and says, just say this to people: you're with this brush company, and you're just giving out free brushes for the end of the year. You're cleaning up your stock, and so this would give him a way to talk to people. And George kind of goes along with it, and he goes home and he sees his mom and dad, and dad's alive in the story. And they have a dog, and the dog normally the dog loves George to pieces. This dog wants to rip him to pieces because he's a stranger. And he realizes that there's a portrait in their parents' house, and normally it's a picture of him and his brother Harry. Well, because he wasn't alive, Harry drowned while swimming. And whereas in real life, he would have protected his brother because he doesn't exist. So it's just Harry on the wall, and that there's a portrait of him, and that it was like the last portrait they did of him, and they died like that day or very soon after. And then he goes to see Mary, his wife. And he goes to, by the way, he goes to the, it's the banking office. And and it doesn't exist anymore. And somebody ran off with the money and ripped off the town. And then he goes to see Mary. We all know Mary. Now, Mary is married in this version, but she's married to kind of a bozo, like her brother-in-law is the one that ripped everybody off. Right?
Yeah. So there's a guy. So it was a guy that had worked in the bank with George Bailey. And yeah, so the guy like takes everybody's money and skips town. And the guy had a brother who's kind of a sap, and everybody kind of feels sorry for him. And he's the one who married Mary, and they have kids together. Right.
And George, and she's just not fulfilled. I mean, she's just married, like you said, to a sap. And he notes that their kids aren't all that cute and that great.
Yeah.
And the son has like a toy gun and keeps shooting at him and says, "Why aren't you dead yet? Why aren't you dead yet?" So it's kind of like they kind of hit you over the head with it. But he gives a brush to Mary, and then he leaves, and then he meets with this angel and says, "I want to live. I don't want that to happen. I want to live again." He says, "Okay, this is your chance." So George goes back, and Mary's happy to see him. They are married now. It's back to the way things are supposed to be. But he notices in the back of her couch is a brush. So you're kind of like, ooh, like was it a dream? Was it not a dream? And that's kind of it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
You could read it in like 15 minutes, you guys. Seriously.
It's really short. It's super short. I mean, again, he sent it as a Christmas card, so it can only be so long. It's like a pamphlet, basically. But it's very well written. Yeah. And it's a complete story. And I mean, it fell into the hands of Frank Capra, and who spun it into this classic American tale that we all know and love now.
And it was about a couple of years in development, and Capra, like I said, he had some. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It Happened One Night, but he's had some successes. But then he's, like I said, he went to make propaganda films. He comes back. He creates this thing called Liberty Pictures, this company, and he went through 9 writers to work on this story to make it into what it is now. And it wasn't a great success. They had big problems with, like, Clifford Odets was on the staff for a little while. Dorothy Parker was on the script for a while. Apparently he was really tough with writers. He was much more of an actor kind of person. But anyway, so then he created this movie, which now we have. It stars Jimmy Stewart, and it comes out in 1946. And should we play the trailer first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's wonderful news, for when all these wonderful people get into the swim, it's a wonderful life. For never before has any film contained such a full measure of the joy of living, the drama of living, and above all, the glorious romance that makes this such a wonderful life.
Don't you ever get tired of just reading about things?
Yeah. Hey, what are you doing tonight?
I don't want to get married to anybody, you understand? I want to do what I want to do. And you...
And you may have heard the story before, but it's true. It wasn't that big of a hit at the time. Mm-hmm. And it didn't get all great reviews. A lot of people thought it was things like they thought it was sappy. and melodramatic, and some people didn't like the screenplay. They thought the leads were good, but like we said, it just was not a big hit. And then the year it comes out, it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, but it was the year that the movie The Best Years of Our Lives was up for everything, which is such a good movie.
You've never seen it. Oh, what a great! Oh, I love that movie. That's my father-in-law's favorite movie of all time. Is that movie?
They play it on Turner Classic Movies, usually on Veterans Day, but it's filled with Hollywood actors who served in the war. And it's all about these men that come back from the war, and then they're basically dealing with their battle stretch, their PTSD, coming back to the States and everything. And it won everything, and it should have. It's a brilliant movie, and it deserved all the accolades. But this is what happened is this movie came out just at the same time as that one did, and that was the big hit. This wasn't the big hit. So Frank Capra goes on to make other movies. Jimmy Stewart becomes Jimmy Stewart. Donna Reed becomes Donna Reed. Everybody goes on, and then in the 70s, the trademark passed, fell through the cracks. So all of a sudden, anybody that wanted to play it could just play it. And so it was on every station. There was a time you could have It's a Wonderful Life would be on something,
Oh, yeah. It would be on 3 channels at the same time.
Yeah. It was
when you had 8 channels altogether.
Yeah. This is back when exactly. And then cable comes along in the 80s, and maybe you have 30 or 40 channels, but 2 or 3 of them would be playing this movie. And some of them would just do it over and over and over again on a loop. And so then what happened was that the author, his family owned the rights to the original story. And somehow they were able to get back the rights of the movie. And the movie was then bought by NBC. And then every year, NBC would just air it once a year. And now I think it's on USA Network a little bit more often. And then I was telling you, Margot, there's a free version on Prime, Amazon Prime, that I watched this afternoon. And it took me about 10 minutes to realize, I'm looking at the colorized version. This is a black and white movie. And then in the 80s, there was this time where they were colorizing movies like crazy. Ugh. And what it did, though, the strange thing, though, is that it did preserve the films. But it does make them look weird. I mean, I like this version much better in black and white than I do in color.
Oh, it's way better in black and white. It's you can get it for free in black and white too. But
yeah.
No, it's meant to be in black and white. And, I mean, the people who were working in black and white, and they had color movies in these days already, but people really learned how to manipulate that form to enhance the meaning of the story. And so, the white snow and the darkness of Potterville and the neon lights and it just doesn't read as, it just is a whole other kind of movie in color.
Right. So we should talk a little bit about, let's go through the cast. So we have Jimmy Stewart as our George Bailey. Oh, no. And you look up his story. He was a hero in World War II and immediately went right and was very humble about it, like a lot of them were. So he's about 37 or so when he stars in this. And he plays George from 20 to 40. And then we have Donna Reed as Mary. How gorgeous is Donna Reed?
Oh, right?
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Her face is like a sunset. It's just so pretty.
Oh, she's so pretty. It's ridiculous.
Yes. And then we have Lionel Barrymore as Mr. Potter, who's our big meanie. And we have Uncle Billy, who's played by Thomas Mitchell. We have Clarence, who's our angel, played by Henry Travers. And Mrs. Bailey, Beulah Bondi. She played Jimmy Stewart's mother in 4 other movies. She made a career out of it.
Yep.
And then we have Bert and Ernie, Frank, Phelan, Ward Bond. Supposedly that's just a coincidence that because the rumor was that Bert and Ernie on Sesame Street, Jim Henson was a big fan of this movie, so he gave them those names. Turns out that's probably just a coincidence. It wasn't the case. But we also have Gloria Graham as Violet. And Margot, I don't know if you've heard of this movie. It's called Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool. And it stars Annette. It stars Annette Bening, who she studied in San Diego acting. That's Margot's based in San Diego.
Yeah, Annette Bening studied. She went to the same junior college and went to the same junior college theater program where I met my husband when we were in college in that program, she was starring. Had just made it. I don't even remember if it had come out yet, but she just made The Grifters, and she came and spoke to our class.
Which I'm so jealous because I just think she's amazing. She played. Its movie is once again. It's called Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool. Annette Bening plays Gloria Graham in Gloria's later years. Gloria.
Oh wow, she does look like her.
Oh, it's really uncanny. So Gloria in her 50s gets cancer. And she's dating a guy who's much, much younger, and he's an actor. And basically, she moves in with his family, and they live near Liverpool. And that's where she spent her final days. So that's Gloria Graham. And Gloria Graham, by the way, also another world-class beauty as Violet. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Gower and Sam Wainwright, Harry Bailey. We have all these characters. The difference is that you get more of the backstory. You really get the story of George his entire life. You meet him as a young boy and see the choices he made, and then why he gets to the point where he is, and why he feels so alone and desperate. And it's a true 3-act wonder that you're being a part of. And my question to you is, how many times do you cry when you watch this movie?
Oh my God. Okay. So I just watched it like a minute ago. I just finished watching it right before we got on here. Mm-hmm. And my kids and my husband were out, and so they come back, and I'm just like, and my husband is going like, what happened? I said, I just finished watching the movie. And he says, It's a Wonderful Life. And I said, yeah. And he's like, so why were you crying? And I looked at him like he was insane. He's never seen it.
What?
He's never, yeah. I'm just learning this for the first time. He's never seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, you got to change that.
I know. And so I was like, and how do you explain this?
No.
In 2 minutes before I have to call Margot.
Yeah.
That's not going to, yeah.
So George Bailey, he's as a young boy, he rescues his brother Harry. Harry goes down, he's sledding, and Harry falls through the ice. And yes. And it's harrowing. And so George saves him. But George develops a hearing problem in one of his ears. He can't hear out of one of his ears. And then as a young man, he works for Mr. Gower, who's the druggist. And the first time I cry myself silly is when George, so Mr. Gower gets a telegram saying that it's World War I around that time, that his son died of the influenza epidemic, which wiped out millions of people. And Mr. Gower gives George this drug a prescription to give to somebody. And George realizes he's putting poison in the medicine. He doesn't know what to do. So he goes to see his father to ask what his father would do. And his father's being berated by Mr. Potter, who wants to take over his family business. So George comes back, and Mr. Gower is furious because he heard from this woman that her prescription hasn't been delivered. So he starts slapping George around. And poor George is like, I know, I'm going to cry now. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
He's so understanding. He's like, I know you're not really mad at me.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Be over in 5 minutes, Ruben. What is this blade voice of capsules?
I feel.
Did you hear what I said?
Yes, sir.
What kind of tricks you playing away? Why are you running to the limit right away? Don't you know that boy's very quick?
I hear him. I'm still here.
You lazy loaf.
Mr. Gower, you don't know what you're doing. You put something wrong in those capsules. I know you're unhappy. You got the telegram and you're upset. You put something bad in those capsules. It wasn't your fault, Mr. Gower. Just look and see what you did. Look at the bottle you took the powder from. It's poison. I tell you, it's poison. I know you feel bad.
Oh.
Don't hurt my sore again. Don't hurt my sore again.
Oh, George.
Oh, Mr. Gower, I would never tell anyone. I know you're feeling. I would never tell so. Hope to die, I won't.
It's poison. And I promise I'll never tell anybody. And he's remarkable. I mean, he never does.
The kid is really good, by the way.
Oh, the blood coming out of his ear, like they're.
Oh yeah.
It's a tough scene to see. And then, so what happens is George just becomes this person that he gives up. His parents can't save up to put him to college, so he has to save up for that. And then he has this money saved for to go to college. It takes him a long time. And that's the right age. He's working for his father. And then his brother Harry's then going to go to college after George. Well, the father dies. And so the whole business is going to go under. And the only reason that they'll keep it together is if if George agrees to stay behind and run the Bailey Business and Loan, the Bailey building. And so he gives his brother money to his brother so his brother can go to college instead. And this is when we meet Mary. And Jimmy Stewart, he falls in love with Mary. And by the way, all George wants to do is travel. That's all this guy wants to do. He wants to travel. He wants to see things. He's super curious. And he's constantly, everything's happening to him to keep him here in Bedford Falls, which is based in New York in the story. And so he marries. His brother goes to college, and then the brother comes back, and they're supposed to switch off. So now George can go off to college and earn an education and stuff. And that's when he finds out his brother met a great girl in college, married her, and by the way, her dad has his own company, and he wants to hire Harry. And George, the look on Jimmy Stewart's face when he realizes, like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm still, yeah. And like, what are you going to do? His brother fell in love. He married a great girl, and, it's this great opportunity. And so George, there's a very famous scene where Harry gets married, and George leaves the party that they have that night, and his mother goes, why don't you go up and look up Mary Hatch? I think she's home right now. Why don't you go look her up? And he goes and looks her up, and and I love it because George is very moody. He has bad moods and is grumpy sometimes. Mm-hmm. But there's this whole great scene, like they're having this, he meets Mary. Mary thinks there's going to be super romantic, but he's a grumpy grouse. And they have an argument, and he leaves. And then when he comes back to get his hat, he forgot his hat. That's when Sam Wainwright calls, and he's sort of a love interest for Mary. And he calls them up to say, hey, invest in my company. You were going to go places. And the faces of Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed are like right next to each other talking into a phone. And the passion that they have for each other could melt butter. It's like they are so hot together in this little black and white scene and this kissing scene. Apparently there was this dialogue that they had to get rid of because they just started making out, and it just worked better that way. So they get married, and that keeps him in Bedford Falls for a little while longer. And then so George never works in plastics. He never goes to New York. He never travels. He and Mary have 4 kids. It's 2 boys, 2 girls. And so George is running this business for a while, and they have, just before, by the way, when he and Mary are going to go on their honeymoon, all they want to do is just go on a honeymoon. They save up $2,000, which I don't know how much that is in today's dollars, but they scrimped and saved, and they were going to travel. And then the bank was going to run out of money. They're the Bailey Business and Loan. People were running for the banks, like to take all their money out because they worried they were going to lose all their money. And Mr. Potter saying to people, I'll pay 50 cents on the dollar for whatever you have in Bailey Business and Loan. And George and Mary, they take their honeymoon money, like, nope, we'll give you money to last until this whole craziness is over. So they never go on their honeymoon, but they move into this really spooky house and live together. And then
it's enormous.
And it's like it's very sweet. Like the scene, it's Bert and Ernie singing outside of the window to them on their honeymoon, on their honeymoon night. And the idea is like they stay there for a few years, and then when the war happens, Harry goes off and becomes a war hero. Bert goes away, but George has to stay in because of his bad ear, but he does what the work he can do at home. The war is over. Harry's a war hero. He's going to come home. And there's money that needs to be deposited in the bank, and it's just before Christmas. And George is stressed out. They never have enough money. They have 4 kids. And I don't know about you, but every time Uncle Billy with that money goes to the bank,
I know. Oh.
And he takes the newspaper out of Potter's hands and gets all like full and like, oh, what are you reading here? Because he's reading about Harry Bailey. And he leaves the goddamn money behind. Every time this kills me. I have to leave the room or fast forward.
Right? I know. Me too.
It drives me crazy. I want to kill Uncle Billy at this point. But this is $8,000 now that's missing. And it basically looks like they embezzled it, right? Because he can't account for it. And $8,000, that's maybe like $50K nowadays, maybe even more. But George is freaked out. So he goes home and he doesn't know how to tell Mary what's going on. He's just completely in a panic. There's scenes where he's like hugging his kids and he's crying and yelling at them. And he's just going through everything. And then he takes off, heads to the bar. And he, by the way, he screams at Zuzu's teacher. His youngest is Zuzu.
Yeah.
When he yells
She's
at,
sick.
she's sick, and he blames the teacher for sending her around half naked without her coat or something. And that's not the teacher's fault. He's just lashing out. But you're just like, there's certain scenes that are so hard to watch because they're so human.
Oh, I know. I know. He's got 4 kids, and they're all the same age.
Yeah. I grew up in that house. I know exactly what they're going through. So
yeah, he goes to the bar. Oh, I know. And that scene for me is hard too when he's in the bar and he's just so
crying.
Oh, I know.
He's so desperate.
Yeah.
He just doesn't know what to do. And he just he drinks too much. And Mr. Martini, who runs the bar, and there's a whole thing about immigrants, the immigrant positive kind of movie. Like
Capra.
Yes.
Capra was an Italian immigrant.
Yep. He came to the States from Italy in the early part of the century. So 20th century, excuse me. So Bailey's there's a Bailey Business and Loan, but they also create homes for people. And they make they're creating affordable housing so that people don't have to go to Potter to rent an apartment. They can actually own a home. And George, they do all these things, but the homes are worth so much more than they actually sell them for because they like the people and all this stuff. So George is just despondent. He runs out of the bar. Mr. Martini tries to protect him, but he won't listen to anybody. Drives his car, crashes it into a tree, and just wanders to this bridge. And it's snowing, and he's freaked out, and he's upset. And then the next thing you know, you see a man jump into the water. And that's Clarence, our angel, by the way, who's been watching George's life. And we've met George through Clarence. And so George jumps in to save him. And then what happens is that Clarence explains, I'm angel second class. I don't have my wings yet. I have to earn them.
Underwear. Wife gave me this on my last birthday. I passed away in it. Oh, Tom Sawyer's drying out, too. You should read the new book Mark Twain's writing now.
How did you happen to fall in?
I didn't fall in. I jumped in to save George.
You what? To save me?
Well, I did, didn't I? You didn't go through with it, did you?
Go through with what?
Suicide.
Oh, it's against the law to commit suicide around here.
Yeah, it's against the law where I come from, too.
Oh, where do you come from?
Heaven? I had to act quickly. That's why I jumped in. I knew if I were drowning, you'd try to save me. You see, you did. And that's how I saved you.
Very funny.
Your lip's bleeding, George.
Yeah. I got a bust in the jaw in answer to a prayer a little bit ago.
Oh, no, George. I'm the answer to your prayer. That's why I was sent down here.
How'd you know my name?
Oh, I know all about you. I've watched you grow up from a little boy.
What are you, a mind reader or something? Well, who are you then?
Clarence Oddbody, AS2.
Oddbody. AS2. What's that AS2?
Angel, second class.
And every time you hear a bell rings, that means that an angel is getting its wings. And so George basically, and he's like, yeah, you're the kind of angel I probably would get, huh? And he's skeptical. And then that's when Clarence gets the idea of like, well, it would be better if, George says, it would be better if I weren't born at all. Mm-hmm. And so Clarence is like, all right, that's what
easy.
You want. Yeah. And so George goes around. He goes back. First he sees the tree. There's nothing wrong with the tree because he didn't drive the car into the tree. There's no car there. Then he goes to Martini's, and then you go to Martini's, and it's like a gin joint out of the 30s. There's jazz music. It's very loud. And the bartender, Nick, is surly. And normally Nick's his pal, but Nick is hostile, and he throws them out. He and Clarence out. No, I'm giving wings. Look at this. And then George sees his mother, and his mother's just running some kind of a flop house kind of situation. Doesn't recognize him. And then he finds out, he looks for his brother. He can't find it. He finds his brother's grave. His brother Harry died because George wasn't there to save Harry. And Harry also saved all these men on a ship in World War II. All the men on the ship died because Harry wasn't there because George wasn't there. And then the big one that we're supposed to be totally shocked by. Well, also it's Pottersville. So it's not.
Oh, yeah, it's Pottersville.
It's Pottersville. Potter runs everything.
And they're all bars. Yeah. It's just all bars. It's nothing but bars.
It's just bars
and one boarding house run by George's mom.
Yeah. And neon lights, and it's very loud, and there's a lot of cops, sounds and things like that. And then then he says, "Where's Mary? I got to see Mary." And Clarence is like, "Oh boy, you don't want to see this one." And Donna Reed comes down the street, and she's basically in kind of a dowdy coat and glasses, and she's leaving the library. And we're told,
but she's an old maid.
She's an old maid. She never married anyone. We're all supposed to think like that's the big tragedy. Which
no,
it's a weak one. They could have thought that one out a little bit more, but George realizes. So he goes to the house that he and Mary raising the kids. The house is abandoned. At one point, George is realizes oh shit, this really happened. I really willed this to happen. And he's trying to grab at Mary, to hug her and to convince her what's going on. And Mary screams and she runs into this bar. And then George runs out of the bar, and Bert, the cop, or Ernie is the cop. I forget, Bert is the cop. Bert shoots at him, in the middle of the street, by the way, crowded street, just starts shooting at him. A man running away. It's Pottersville. It's lawless.
In the Twitter conversation that I was reading, where I found out that this was a short story, they were like, everybody's going on and on about, oh, it's the worst thing that she's a librarian, and somebody said, oh yeah, but she's a librarian in Pottersville, which means it's just a library of racist books and porn. That's all it is.
Actually, you're right. It would be terrible. I'm sure they have no budget. I'm sure they don't get the good books. So George goes back to the bridge, and where all this started, and then he prays to God, please let me live again. I want to live again.
Clarence! Clarence! Help me, Clarence! Get me back! Get me back! I don't care what happens to me! Get me back to my wife and kids! Help me, Clarence, please! Please! I want to live again! I want to live again! I want to live again. Please, God, let me live again. Hey, George! George! You all right? Hey, what's the matter? Now get out of here, Bert, or I'll hit you again. Get out of here. What the Sam Hill you yelling for, George? George? Bert, do you know me? Know you? You kidding? I've been looking all over town trying to find you. I saw your car piled into that tree down there, and I thought maybe you... Hey, your mouth's bleeding. Are you sure you're all right? What you... My mouth's bleeding, Bert! My mouth's bleeding! Zuzu's pedals. Zuzu... There they are! Bert! What do you know about that? Merry Christmas!
And all of a sudden, and then
and I'm crying my eyes out.
And I'm bawling my eyes out. I can't even, because it's Jimmy Stewart. I mean, my God. George, then Bert sees him on the bridge and it's like, hey man, we've been looking for you. And you recognize me. And George starts running through the streets. And it's a pretty famous scene. Jimmy Stewart kind of waving at the buildings and stuff like that, and yelling and screaming and just with joy, with absolute joy. And he goes home, and and the bank examiner's there, and all these people are there, and then he's all he cares about is seeing his family. And so he sees the kids and he hugs them, and then Mary comes in, and then we find out that Mary went out around town and found out what was going on and told everybody George needs money or he's going to wind up in jail. We need your help. And so all of a sudden, everybody in town just starts coming through and giving George money. And they put it in the baskets, and Mr. Martini busted the jukebox.
Yeah.
That always makes me laugh. And Sam Wainwright said his office is authorized to send up to $25,000, which is a lot of money. Woo! And then the bank examiners are kind of like, all right, he's okay. They're not going to process. They're going to serve him papers. And then the old Janie, the older daughter, starts playing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and then everybody starts singing along. And then Harry comes in, and the fool flew in a blizzard to get there in time, as he tells everyone. And he and George are reunited, and I get all weepy again. And then,
oh, me too.
I can't with those two. And then. Well, we forgot to mention that Clarence is carrying around a copy of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and he leaves a copy of it on the table that George can see, and it says, "No man is a failure who has friends." And that's when I start really sobbing. And then you hear bells ringing, and little Zuzu says, "Look, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings." He's like, "Yeah, that's right." And I'm a soppy mess. And then they sing "Old Lang Syne," and I'm done, and I have to lie down.
Yep.
And that's the movie.
And that's the movie.
We spoil, by the way. We tell you everything.
Ay. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. It's amazing.
It's completely amazing.
I freaking love this movie.
Yeah. It works on multiple viewings, too. You notice new things about it. And there's new characters you really care about. Yeah. Like, I love Violet, Gloria Graham. I like her character.
I love her. And then this time, this is the first time I was ever like, who are these bank examiners that are working on Christmas Eve?
They're there till late.
Like literally, as we're recording this, Congress is shutting. They're about to they're going to shut down the government. Like all these people's jobs hang in the balance, and Congress is like, well, let's go home.
Yeah.
But the bank examiners, they're on the job.
Well,
they're not going to sleep. Yep.
So it's like we said, it wasn't a big hit at the time. It got nominated for a lot of awards, but it wasn't until around the 70s they started playing it all the time. And then in the 80s and 70s and 80s, it was playing all the time. And then NBC bought the rights to it, and now it's much more of a special deal. But you can rent this movie very easily. It's available on streaming. You can find it anywhere. But it's a classic for a reason, and it still makes me cry. I'm surprised I haven't broken down yet. I think I'm going to be okay, but I have like 10 minutes left for the movie in my other room. Yeah, so I will be.
I cried. I cried the entire time. I did not. I really, the second, like when he saves his brother in the ice and and I love the opening of the movie where it's the stars talking to each other. That's so clever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super, super clever. Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
No, I've seen it so many times. I can't think of the first time I saw it. I had to be really small.
I think I was like 12 or 13, and I remember I ran to my parents' room and I bawled my eyes out.
Yeah, I used to close. I remember being really little and watching it, and with my family at Christmas time. And I remember like having to look away and close my eyes when Mr. Gower is beating him up.
Oh.
Yeah, the kids. I think those kids are so good. The little girl that plays Violet and the little girl that plays Mary and the boy that plays George is so good.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the acting is incredible here.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yep. We love it.
We love it.
And it's a great story. I thought it was so good. Super short.
Yeah.
But very good.
Yeah.
And well written.
Yeah, and I'm glad we read it. I mean, it was good, and I always love seeing this movie. So I was really psyched when you made the suggestion.
So we are going to do the Wizard of Oz.
Yes, that's coming up.
Oh, yes, coming up.
So just cool your jets, everybody. Oh, so book versus movie, which do you prefer?
Oh, movie.
Yeah, of course, right?
Of course. The book is super good, and it's a fully realized story. But all of the extra touches that ended up in the Capra version are so great. Mm-hmm. They add so much. It's such a beautiful story.
I agree. I totally agree. So normally we say, what are we doing next? The next thing we're going to be doing is The Wizard of Oz. So you guys prepare for that. And Margot, where can they find you?
Well, you can. Well, I'm not doing a lot of social media right now because it's the holidays.
Right.
But normally you can find me on all the social media platforms. All of my handles everywhere are at She's Not Your Mama. My other podcast, which I'll get back to as soon as I finish this freaking book, is the Chingona Homesteader podcast. And where can they find you?
All of my social media is at Brooklyn Fit Chick, and I'm mostly active on Twitter and Instagram. And my blog is called brooklynfitchick.com. And the other shows I work on are the Not Fade Away podcast, the Fit Bottom Girls podcast, the Dorking Out show, and the Best Neighbors podcast. And guys, thanks so much for coming. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with The Wizard of Oz.
Woohoo!
Woo! Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book vs. Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's Book vs. Movie Podcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn Fit Chick on social media and Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thanks so much again for checking out our show, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.